Hridayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Pradavajikacharya Shishimad His Divine Grace Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Ananta Gauri Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Shlahadadas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudeva Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gogopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Ganga Jamuna Maya Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai Samveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai Brihat Madanga Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, 3rd chapter, text number 23. Daivadineshu Kameshu Daivadinaha Swayam Puman Ko Vishwambeta Yogena Yogeshvaram Anuvrataha Daivadineshu Kameshu Daivadineshu Kameshu Daivadina Swayam Puman Daivadina Swayam Puman Ko Vishwambeta Yogena Ko Vishwambeta Yogena Yogeshvaram Manuvrataha Yogeshvaram Manuvrataha Daivadineshu Kameshu Daivadina Swayam Puman Ko Vishwambeta Yogena Yogeshvaram Manuvrataha. Vaishnavis. Daiva, supernatural. Adineshu, being controlled. Kameshu, in sense enjoyment. Daiva adinaha, controlled by supernatural force. Swayam, himself. Puman, living entity. Ka, whoever. Vishrambeta, can have faith in. Yogena, by devotional service. Yogeshvaram, the Supreme Lord. Anuvrataha, serving. Translation: every living entity is controlled by a supernatural force, and thus his sense enjoyment is also under the control of that supernatural force. No one, therefore, can put his faith in Lord Krishna's transcendental sense activities, but one who has become a devotee of the Lord by rendering devotional service. Purport: as stated in Bhagavad Gita, no one can understand the transcendental birth and activities of the Lord. The same fact is herein corroborated. No one, but one who is enlightened by the devotional service of the Lord, can understand the difference between the Lord's activities and those of others. Let me read that again, sorry. No one but one who is enlightened by the devotional service of the Lord can understand the difference between the Lord's activities and those of others, who are controlled by the supernatural force. The sense enjoyment of all animals, men, and demigods within the purview of the material universe is controlled by the supernatural force called Prakriti, or Daivi Maya. No one is independent in obtaining sense enjoyment, and everyone in this material world is after sense enjoyment. Persons who are themselves under the control of the supernatural power cannot believe that Lord Krishna is under any control beyond himself. Persons who are themselves under the control of supernatural power cannot believe that Lord Krishna is not under any control beyond himself in the matter of sense enjoyment. They cannot understand that his senses are transcendental. In the Brahma Samhita, the Lord's senses are described as omnipotent, i.e., with any sense he can perform the activities of the other senses. One who has limited senses cannot believe that the Lord can eat by transcendental power, or hearing. Let me read that again. One who has limited senses cannot believe that the Lord can eat by his transcendental power of hearing, and can perform the act of sex life simply by seeing. The controlled living entity cannot even dream of sense activities in his conditional life. Did I read that wrong again? The controlled living entity cannot even dream of such sense activities in his conditional life. But simply by the activities of bhakti yoga, he can understand that the Lord and his activities are always transcendental. As the Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, text 55, Bhaktyamam abhijanati yavanyas chasmi tattvataha. One cannot know even a fraction of the activities of the Lord if he is not a pure devotee of the Lord. Om Agyanatamirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Darati Swapadantikam. So what's it called when somebody has like a party or a gathering at their house and they ask everybody to bring something? Everybody's supposed to bring a dish. Potluck, okay. So this might be a little bit of a potluck class. There's a lot of, because there's a lot of really beautiful points that were made in this purport. I can see them. I'm reading them and I'm going, wow. And if I had time to think about them for a while, maybe I could probably come up with some interesting things to say about each one of them. But be honest with you, my brain is 70 years old, and I'm going to do the best I can. But I think I've got a couple points here I can make, but I'm probably going to poop out after 2 or 3. So everybody please be ready to bring a dish, potluck. Here we go. All right, thank you. Well, the first point that comes to my mind, I remember hearing Prabhupada say in a lecture that, he's making the point that, well, if you can't understand Krishna with these senses, then, well, what's the point? Why are we bothering? Right? Because we can't understand Krishna. And we're hearing that in this purport, in the translation of the purport, that, you can't understand anything about Krishna's activities with these senses and on the material platform. What's the point? Then Prabhupada answered his own question, and he said, yeah, Krishna can't be understood by the material senses. And he quoted that famous verse from, I believe it's from the Padma Purana, Atakshri Krishna nama adi nama na baved grayam indriye sevan mukhe hi jivado swayam eva sparatyada. That Krishna can't be understood by he used the words blunt material senses. They're dull, but he can be understood by devotional service, beginning by engaging the tongue in devotional service, chanting, taking prasadam, and then swayam eva sparatyada, and Krishna is revealed. So the only way we're going to understand Krishna is Krishna has to reveal himself to us. And he reveals himself to us. He explains what his criterion is for that in the Bhagavad Gita 10th chapter, text number 11, 10, 11. He says that, 10 and 11, he says, to those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. Out of compassion for them, I, dwelling within their heart, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So when Krishna is pleased with a living entity, a soul's devotional service, then he reveals himself. He reveals himself to that person, and that person can understand something about devotional service. So, sounds really simple, right? On paper, it sounds real. So, yeah, what's so hard about that? Well, what's hard about that, I was thinking about this last night, I was remembering what Srivas Prabhu read on Bhaktisiddhanta Maharaj's appearance day. He read an excerpt from a lecture that Prabhupada gave in Calcutta in 1972. And, I was expecting to hear something, some about some pastime of Bhaktisiddhanta, some glorification. Well, of course, it was glorification. But the particular point that Prabhupada was making in glorification of his spiritual master, he made the point that he was Rupanuga Apasiddhanta. I can't remember the Sanskrit, but the gist of it was that he followed strictly Rupa Goswami. And the principle was Yena Tena Prakadena Manak Krishna Navesayat, that in the beginning, somehow or another, you have to engage the person in devotional service. And then rules and regulations can come later on. First you engage the person. You engage the person in an activity that's pleasing Krishna, and they'll feel some satisfaction with that too, once they're properly engaged. And then when they're practically engaged, then you can say, now, we don't do this, we do this, but we don't do that. And then you introduce the rules and regulations. But first, engage them, get them to feel, okay, they got some happiness in Krishna's service. And then that. And Prabhupada said, he made the point, I'm criticized by my God brothers that I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. And then Prabhupada said, I'm doing everything. Right? I'm doing everything. They don't understand. This is how you have to do it. You have to first get the person attached, give them a higher taste by engaging in them in devotional service, and then he also went on to make the point that in the beginning there's going to be discrepancies. You see, you can't expect that right off the bat everybody's going to get everything right. It doesn't work like that. He said because they're coming from a different. He said they're coming from different activities, different culture, different. And he didn't say this, but he kind of implied it, different world view, different understanding of life, what it's all about, and I was thinking, well, okay, I was just sitting there with that piece of paper. I asked Srivas for that paper after he read it that morning, and I was thinking, okay, now what does Prabhupada mean here? And then I remembered something he said he was with all the book distributors in Atlanta, Georgia in 1975, and he was having like a darshan with them, basically. So different points came up. One of the points that came up was, I think Tripurari made the point to Prabhupada. Said, Prabhupada, sometimes, in the airport we say this and that to somebody, to get them to take the book, and it's not exactly the complete truth, but Prabhupada is okay. He said, you have to understand, he made the point that in this world, everybody is demons. That's what he said. He said, everybody is demons. He said, everyone. He said, demons means they're after sense enjoyment. He says, devotees, they have no sense enjoyment. They're just engaged in activities to please Krishna. So I was just kind of meditating on that and thinking that, we've taken up something that's it's quite a, what's the word? Radical. I mean, it's revolutionary. It's a challenge. Every Prabhupada said, everybody's demons, and here we are. We're among that category of people. Our activities weren't, our culture wasn't, our whole worldview was. I mean, I grew up thinking that the ultimate, the perfection of life is to gratify your senses. And my criterion for a successful person was the more somebody is seen obviously successful in gratifying his senses, wealth, women, followers, the more, that's a successful person. And the more the person's has that, the more successful. Totally wrong. Totally diametrically opposite to the Vedic understanding of life, which is, no, success is how good you are at pleasing Krishna's senses, not how good you are at gratifying your senses. So the point I'm making, the reason I'm mentioning this is because, as I said, in the Bhagavad Gita, it sounds simple. Oh yeah, just, to those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give them the understanding by which they could come to me. It is simple, but it's the same time, it's a big challenge. And so the reason I make this point is that we have to help each other. We have to help each other. We've taken on a big challenge. We're trying to transform ourselves. What to speak of other people? First, we have to transform ourselves from demons, who basically, I mean, if you're not included in this, please don't take offense. But for some of us, coming from the starting point of demons, people who are interested in sense gratification, and we're trying to transform ourselves into pure devotees, people who are interested only in the sense enjoyment of Krishna. And that's no mean feat. That's a big job, That takes some doing. And so we really have to help each other. And I think that's an important part of devotional service. And I think that's something that Krishna is pleased with when he sees devotees trying to help each other. And a verse that comes to my mind in Bhagavad Gita that sort of supports that is that verse, Matchita matgata prana buddhayantas parashparam katayantas chamam nicham tushanti charamanticha, that the thoughts of my devotees dwell in me, their lives are surrendered unto me, and they derive great satisfaction and bliss, enlightening one another and conversing about me. So I thought about that, and I'm going to offer an explanation why the devotees experience great satisfaction and bliss, enlightening one another and conversing about Krishna. There might be others, but my understanding is, one idea is that Krishna's pleased by that. Krishna likes it. Krishna likes it when the devotees exchange, when they sit down, when they discuss the philosophy. Two devotees on an equal level discuss the philosophy to cement their understanding. A senior devotee instructs a junior devotee to try to help him understand properly. Right? Those different exchanges. Or the junior devotee inquires submissively. Krishna likes that. He's pleased by that. He's pleased by that activity, and that's why the devotees experience satisfaction and bliss when they engage in that activity. See? So we're meant to do that. We're meant to do that because, we're not all, and everybody has their ups and downs, So rather than, and the nature of the material world is when somebody's up, you're envious of them. And when somebody's down, kick them, If they're down, kick them. Make sure they stay down, bury them, run them into that's material consciousness. But spiritual consciousness, if you see somebody doing well, inspired, enlivened like that, then, oh, wow, that's awesome, that's great. Let me try to assist that devotee. Let me try to help him even become more fired up. Let me try to assist him in his service, right? And if you see somebody, that's a devotional mentality. And if we see somebody struggling, we should feel like oh, this is my opportunity to just kind of see somebody struggling, we should, reach out there and, hey, Prabhu, Haribol, do whatever we can to try to encourage and enthuse that devotee, help him come up again in devotional service. Another thought is, once again, this is like right off the top of my head. Another thought is that, devotees aren't just, devotees don't grow on trees. You might have noticed that, there's how many people in this room at the moment? Like 50? Not even 50. What are we, like about 3 dozen here? How many people are in Los Angeles? 10 million or something like that? Very rare. I mean, I think I've done the math a bunch of times. I think it's like 1 in 100,000 people here in California are devotees or chanting Hare Krishna. So devotees are rare. It's not like, we might look like just ordinary human beings to each other, but we've traveled great existential distances to be where we are today. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Sahasra, how's it go? Manushyanam Sahasreshu, Kaschit Yadati Siddha. Out of many thousands among people, one endeavors for perfection. And then of one of those, hardly, and then of thousands among those, one knows me in truth. So devotees are very rare. It's taken a soul, a lot of penance, austerity, a lot of work to possibly to get to the point where they're living in the association of the devotees. So each one of us should be mindful of that, and if somebody's kind of like, reach out, try to help, because we might be in that position too. That's another thought too, that at some point in the future we might be in that position. So certainly we would want people to reach out and try to assist us. So anyway, just a couple thoughts on that verse, today's verse. See, was anything else? I'll stop there. Anybody have anything they'd like to? What time is it? Okay, I could stop there. Does anybody have anything they? Dear Alitabu? As I said, there's so many more things that could be said on this purport. My brain just doesn't work fast enough and well enough to kind of do it on the spot. Yeah, such annoying. Dear Alita, I don't know. Dira first and then Sachi. Thank you.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you. So I remember in the last line, I think it says that to understand Krishna, one has to be a pure devotee. Otherwise, one cannot understand him. So I was thinking of this point, like there are even within spiritual practitioners, there are so many different kinds. And then there is, the broad categories like karmis, yogis, jnanis, like that. So unless there is another verse in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, unless one becomes free from karma and jnana, means unless one comes to devotional service, one cannot understand Krishna. So that was one of the points that kind of came to my mind.
Right, yeah, it's not by karma, it's not by jnana. Krishna, I've heard Prabhupada say this, Krishna is not known as Jnani Vatsala or Yogi Vatsala or Karma. No, he's Bhakta Vatsala. He's particularly favorable, particularly inclined to his devotees. That's what pleases Krishna, and that's when he reveals himself to the devotee, yeah.
Yeah, nice class, given that it was on the spot.
I did my best.
I think a nice thing in the purport was that Prabhupada said that only by Bhakti Yoga can you understand Krishna. And I just wanted to say that's a revolutionary conception. Because if you're anywhere religious at all, in other words, if you're Christian or if you're Catholic or whatever you may be, Protestant, that conception, it's not understood. They may say it in some far-fetched way, but they never really gave a perspective what Bhakti Yoga means, by the devotion to God, serving God. Although they use that terminology, serving God, but everybody does it on their own mental platform. Bhakti Yoga is specifically referring to a certain kind of activity. And by that activity, you can actually understand God, Krishna. And I thought that was extremely revolutionary when I first joined the Krishna conscious movement. And I recall that when I first came, the first thing they did to me is they threw me in the pot room, washed all the pots. And I would ask them, why am I doing this? I couldn't understand what the relationship was. But they explained, that the purpose is that it's a cleansing process. It's humbling. It's trying to understand that, you are a servant. Because very few people think that they're a servant. They think that everything else is a servant for them. So I thought there was a very unique conception in terms of what Prabhupada says in his purport. He said it so specifically that only by bhakti yoga can you understand the transcendental activities of the Lord. So when you say there's so many demons out there, because they're not serving God through the process of bhakti yoga, because they have no conception of what that means. And that's why it's so important to have a guru, a teacher.
Yeah, they have no conception.
That's the difference of anything that we do and what anybody else does.
Yeah, they have no information. There's that verse, as it goes, Sarva Padivinimuktam Tatpavartena Nimalam Rishikena Rishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchate, that they don't know that service means, what spiritual life, religion means, satisfying the senses of the master of the senses. They don't have that information. I'm from a Jewish background, so in the Jewish religion, you offer prayers and they glorify God, but there's no understanding of that God has senses and that you have to engage in activities to please his senses. It's just not there. That understanding is not there. So that's something special that we're getting from Prabhupada and of course from Brahma Madhva Gaudiya Vaishnav Siddhanta, that God is a person. Okay, that's kind of there. It's there. It was there in Judaism. I guess it's there in Christianity too. That sense of God's a person, but that the unique contribution of Brahma, Vaishnavism is that he's a person and he's got senses. He's got eyes, he's got ears, he's got nose, and you can please, and you're supposed to engage in activities to please his senses and enter into a relationship with him. I think that's most developed in Vaishnavism. Yeah, Archie. Sachin, I wanted to say something, then Archita, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Prabhu. I have a comment in this, but just to follow his what Dira Lalita was asking. There's one verse by Lord Vishmadev when he was talking to the Pandavas, where he says, Nahyasya karhichir rajam pumam veda viditsitan yadvi nyanyasa yukta muhyanti kavayo apihi. He said, O king, talking to Yudhishthira Maharaj, no one can know the plan of the Lord, Sri Krishna. Even though great philosophers inquire exhaustively, they are bewildered. And then Srila Prabhupada and the purpose says that the bewilderment of Maharaj Yudhishthira over his past sinful acts and the result sufferings is completely negated by the great authority Bhishma. Yudhishthira, he says, so King Yudhishthira was thinking all the time, like he carried that remorse all the time, that he was feeling that, I did wrong, but actually no. Lord Bhishma was saying, no one can understand it, and he mentioned all the 12 Mahayanas. Right. So now, coming to the point that I want mention is that something that I remark when you mention is about the challenge that we have to take. And I was analyzing that point that, as you said, Srila Prabhupada was criticized sometime by his own God brothers, and immediately the thought came to my mind, just the fact that he was engaging Melechas, Yavanas, and also including, something that in the Indian tradition is not ever heard. The women were included, and Srila Prabhupada embraced that as her daughters. Mm-hmm. So it requires a lot of compassion for that. Because other things were coming to my mind, like thinking, devotees, we had Druta, what's his name? The devotee who wrote the books, Kushakrata. Yeah. We hear the stories about him. And then we have the devotee Ramsada, the one that Indradyumna Swami was mentioning at that past time, that was totally out of it. And like that, I include myself and many of us. But it requires compassion because many devotees were around him. They couldn't understand. They thought this person is useless. So how can we actually come to the point that challenge ourselves to see that aspect? Unless someone has compassion, or you got more or less you're at that level, you can include people. Yeah. Otherwise, you make discriminations. The bodily concept of life is rooted in our heart.
Yeah, Prabhupada had compassion, and he knew exactly what he was doing, and that's kind of the point he made in that little, thing that Savas read that morning. Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, probably everybody knows this. Bhakti Siddhanta Maharaj, Prabhupada's spiritual master, he spent 10 years chanting. He did what's called Sata Koti Nam Jagya, which means 1,000 million names, 1 billion names. He's from the age of 30 to the age of 40. He sat in a bhajan kutir in Mayapur and chanted 192 rounds a day. And if I remember the story correctly, he didn't complete it. He didn't complete it, right? But he had a vision. I think his father, Rupa Goswami, I can't remember which personalities appeared to him in some sort of a vision and said, okay, that's good, that's enough, Now go to Calcutta and preach, something to that effect. So that was the conclusion. He did that, and he got that. So in other words, they didn't want him to just continue in that line. They wanted him to go preach. So Prabhupada's his disciple, he understood that. He understood that, that all this sadhana culminates in compassion and going out and giving it to the... So Prabhupada did that. Prabhupada knew exactly what he was doing when he came. He knew, engage us in preaching activities, which he did. Especially after he saw that his early disciples came back to him and expressed that they felt they were incapable of chanting, what to speak of 192 rounds. They were incapable of chanting 64 rounds. They felt they were incapable of chanting 32 rounds. So Prabhupada made that special adjustment, concession. Okay, 16 rounds and preach. So Prabhupada knew exactly what he was doing. Yeah, Archita Prabhu.
One of the most important things that Subhash just said in his very nice presentation is you have to have a spiritual master. Otherwise, you can be doing the same things externally, but be completely off the path if you're not connected to Krishna by a bona fide spiritual master. Just like, for instance, washing pots. There are many so-called spiritual organizations that they engage people in washing pots and doing gardening and all that, but because the leader is not a pure devotee of Krishna, ultimately the people don't feel satisfied. You see so many exposés. Oh, they kept me practically as a slave for 10 years in this spiritual organization, just washing pots and plucking weeds. But if you did that under Prabhupada's order, then you feel satisfied. Like Prabhupada himself said, the person who's offering the rose, the pujari, is not any more important than the person who grew the rose, the gardener, because it's all on the transcendental platform. And why is it transcendental? Because he's on the transcendental platform and he's leading us to that transcendental platform. So the mystery of Bhakti Yoga is that it's not obvious. Just Prabhupada himself used to say right here in this room, you can be doing anything practically for Krishna, distributing the books, typing the books, cleaning the temple, whatever. Why is all of that devotional service? Because it's going through him. And he's a pure devotee. It's not that you can open any building anywhere and just get people to clean and type and whatever, and it's devotional service. No. So the bigger mystery is even war. That's why people can't understand the Bhagavad Gita. How Krishna is God, and he's engaging Arjuna to fight. He wants him to kill even his own grandfather. That's why Bhakti Yoga is a mystery. It has to be connected. You have to understand Krishna through somebody who knows him, a pure devotee. Otherwise, Prabhupada himself, when he went to Russia, he said to Professor Katowski, what's the difference between you and us? You've chosen Lenin as your leader, and you do whatever he says. We've chosen Krishna, and we do what Krishna says. So now you have that dilemma in the world. This so-called leader of the Russians is telling people to go and fight and kill people who look just like them, their brothers just across the border, and they're doing it. Some of them are surrendering without fighting, but most of them are doing it. And it's hellish. They're all going to hell. But the same thing, if it was ordered by a pure devotee of the Lord, you'd go to the spiritual world. So that's why Bhakti Yoga is not so easy to understand.
Yeah, great comment. Thank you. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.